2020, we've also seen a lot of, I mean, we've mentioned this earlier, but we saw a lot of crackdown in Hong Kong. We've seen, I mean, a lot of talk about what's happening in Xinjiang. And of course, we know about Tibet very well here in India. So, despite all of these very blatant and egregious human rights violations, we saw recently that there was an investment deal between the EU and China. And I emphasize, I mean, the human rights violations because EU is one geopolitical entity that harps on about human rights all the time. So what happened to all of these Western values or European values when the EU sat down and concluded this deal?
Look, the Roman statue, or is it a Greek statue of Europa, is of a very pretty woman. Now, because it's a marble statue, we don't know how it was originally carved. Was it a goddess or was it a whore? And I think basically what happened was China found the right price for the lady in question to open her legs. I'm sorry to use that vulgar terminology, but there's really nothing else to describe the EU trade deal. It's basically sold out. It's opened its legs for the highest bidder. And that is Europe for you. But Europe was never the sort of, I know Europeans have this image of themselves as this sort of, the empire of ideas, as they call it. As it turns out, Europe is just a very high priced prostitute.
But what does Europe want? I mean,
Europe desperately wants money.
right.
Europe wants money because their social engineering schemes backfired on them. The euro has backfired on them because Margaret Thatcher was very accurate when she said that Europe was too diverse for the economies of so many different countries to sort of rationalize and equalize.
Right.
She said it was impossible. We now realize that it was because we allowed ourselves to get carried away. It may have still been possible had the original EU of what was it, 12 member states or whatever held on. That would have still been possible, I believe. Difficult, but possible. But then they made the mistake of overexpansion.
Right.
So the first major flaw was the overexpansion. The second flaw then was this whole policy of allowing refugees and things in, which just destroyed the social cohesion out there. So you first screw up the economic grand plan, then you screw up the social grand plan, that when your own your social integration of Europe has not yet happened. You then bring in another wave of much more difficult refugees who are almost impossible to integrate into society. Why? Because they come from third world countries. In third world countries, what is the definition of a third world country? It's where the state does not have a monopoly of violence. So people tend to be violent because if you come and hit me, the police isn't going to come arrest them. You have to go hit this guy back. Whereas in a first world country, by definition, your instant reaction is to go to the police. So you're seeing things like this of a third world country suddenly move en masse to a first world country. And this is when you hadn't even finished integrating member states like Greece entirely, socially speaking. You hadn't integrated them. Then you moved on to places like Poland and all of that because, to use an Americanism, they drank their own Kool-Aid. They didn't understand the cold, calculating genius, and the EU in its original form was genius. And why was the EU formed? Let's not forget that. It was the coal and steel community that was formed originally, because that was the core of war making. And after World War II, countries that were not Germany wanted Germany contained. And Germany wanted rehabilitation. So when you have a coal and steel community, it both rehabilitates Germany and it contains Germany. Right? That was the genius of the EU. They forgot the initial lessons. They forgot their first principles. They lost sight of what the core values were. They got taken in by all their propaganda. Now, propaganda is very good when you're feeding it to the other side, but when you start, This is like those Hindi movies. You can put the dysentery pills into other people's food, but then when you eat your own dysentery pill-laden food, then you're in serious trouble. That's what's happened with the EU.
Right. Very fascinating insights, Abhijit ji.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.